you know, starting to record. Here we go. So here's what I had on the PowerPoint of tools that we talked about last week: an actual whiteboard or a DIY whiteboard, Realia, screen share of an image, a text, a document, a PowerPoint, and the Zoom whiteboard. And you all thought of all those things. Nice work. So remember in training when we used to switch hats? When we would do an activity and then switch hats and think about how the activity was taught? I would like to highlight that I got you to give me this information. Instead of me just lecturing, blah, 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 here are the tools, I got you all to give it to me. And that's going to be a really important tool to use. It's important in face-to-face class, but it's also really important to Zoom, where we're making the students do the work, which maximizes student talk time, rather than us doing the work and giving the students the answers. So we talked about how to present information on Zoom. Now let's talk about maximizing student talk time. So it's important when we're teaching online to think about the time that we have together and the time that students will be away from us. Our together time is even more compressed than it was when we had in-person classes, when we had an hour and a half or 2 hours twice a week. Now we've got 1 hour twice a week, and a good 10 or 15 minutes of that is likely to be eaten up by tech things, especially at first. So our together time, it's going to be really important. So in the chat box, please tell me, what is our together time for? What's our goal with our time together with students? Mm-hmm. 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 Exactly. It's time, our time together is time to practice and to work on comprehension. It's time to get the students speaking, to reestablish community that students had, that we had when we had in-person classes, reconnecting, guiding students with instruction, getting the students talking, getting them listening, encouraging communication, answering questions that they might have, getting them to feel comfortable and getting them with talking and with making mistakes. Introducing and highlighting new language, making language fun as opposed to high stakes nervousness. We want it to be fun. Conversation and pronunciation, and getting them comfortable with Zoom. Yep, great. See, I made you do it again. You gave me the information before I gave it to you. So I agree. We're looking at creating community, supporting each other, laughing, and getting some English practice in there. So then what is our homework time for? Put that in the chat box, please. Mm-hmm. 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 You guys are so good. So we've got encouraging practicing what was learned in class. Yep, we're extending the learning outside of class. Lindsay says practicing speaking in public, maybe with family, other English speakers. Practicing and reinforcing what we talked about or learned. Thinking about what they want to do with English. It's about saving class time for speaking practice. Good point, Mary Elizabeth. It's time for students to develop their own questions or identify their own needs as they practice. Very true. Because, you know, when we're in class, as students, we're focused on keeping up with what's happening around us. And it's homework time that allows learners to really focus on their individual needs. What's tough for them? What do they need more support with? Diane says, with homework, you can practice writing, reading, and listening related to the lessons, coming up with words they want to know how to pronounce. And Nancy Kuo says, writing practice, writing sentences or skits using the English that we used in class. Absolutely. So the homework time is time when we can extend learning. It's time for practicing and memorizing and experimenting. And we want it to be challenging and engaging and motivating for students. So we'll need to be really mindful of this when we're lesson planning and make sure that we're maximizing our together time for that speaking practice that allows us to create community. Okay, so lesson planning is a little bit different now because we will only have about 45 minutes and we want this to be super light and fun. So let's think of lesson planning as a sandwich. We've got the warm-up, the light task, that's our tomatoes and our lettuce and our toppings, our pickles. The fat task is your protein of choice, and then the review and cool down we've got here on the bottom. So I'd like for you to imagine that we're in a class and our topic is at the grocery store. Our class topic is at the grocery store. Please think of an activity that could be used for each of these lesson components that would relate to that theme of at the grocery store. And I'll give you 3 minutes to write down your ideas, and then we're going to share, and I'm going to call randomly on people. So you'll want to have your ideas down so that you don't feel nervous when I call on you, if I call on you. I'm setting my timer. Ready to share? Okay. Okay, so to start, an idea for a warm-up in our lesson about at the grocery store. Lindsay.
All right, hold on, let me pull up my notes. Warm up, list your favorite foods, or list some foods you know. This would, of course, been covered in a previous lesson.
Great, list some foods. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then perhaps introduce some grocery store directional vocabulary like aisle, front, back, end. Light practice would be speaking framed sentences, excuse me, where are the apples? Fat part would be a short dialogue with partners and a customer worker, maybe a 3 or 4 line dialogue, could be framed or not. Excuse me, where are the apples? They are in the front of the store, they are in aisle 7, whatever. Thank you. And then the cool down could be like pulling up like a grocery store map with like different pictures on it and saying, where are the apples? And they could say the front of the store, the back of the store, things like that. So
Great. So starting with connecting to what they already know, asking them to list food vocabulary or their favorite foods. Then going into a light dialogue. Is that right, Lindsay? A light dialogue.
Yeah, like frame sentences, like practice, like putting those foods into like a sentence frame. Yeah.
Great, putting foods into sentence frame, then a dialogue, and then the final push is asking students to, I forget.
Like they could, like, to each other, like, I'll point to, like, where, you know, look at the map, where are the apples? The apples
Okay, great.
are on the front of the store. Where
Giving
is the
directions in the
cashier? The cat, maybe introduce different vocabulary, barely, like, where's the cashier? They might know that word,
Great.
having been to a store. So, yeah, so things like that.
Excellent.
Something
Thank
more
you.
declarative and less structured.
Something more declarative and less structured. Great, and we've got students speaking the whole time. Okay, it's hard for me to remember the whole lesson plan, so let's go piece by piece. We're gonna change tactics here. So another idea for just a warm up for the lesson. Joey, are you raising your finger? Are you raising your hand? You're muted, Joey.
Thank you. I was thinking of just having them imagine that they're going to go to the grocery store and talk to them about what do you think might be different now that we have the coronavirus? Have you been to a grocery store? What have you noticed is different? So that they can start thinking about what it would be like to be there.
Great. So again, connecting with what students already know, what they're likely experiencing.
And then imagine what might be different.
Yeah, what is different now, or what might be different now in the time of coronavirus at the grocery store.
Some of them may have been to the grocery store and some of them may not
Right.
have, and they could learn from each other, those who have been there, because
Yeah.
it definitely has changed.
Yes.
That was my
For
idea
example,
for a warm-up.
Yeah. For example, I embarrassed myself by trying to bring my bags into Albertsons.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
You can't do it right now, maybe later. But yeah, people need to know that. And
People
you
are
know,
like,
masks, I know, shame on you. But yeah, so just to get them talking about what, you know, kind of envisioning it and communicating about it with each other and putting their ideas on the board, that type of thing.
Yep, great. So getting the students talking, getting them thinking about real situations and speaking about the vocabulary. Great. Let's move on to the second part, which is the light task. So in Lindsay's lesson plan, that was using sentence frames, putting that food vocabulary into sentence frames. Let's get another idea. Lizzie, would you like to share a light task?
I had a similar sort of focus as what Lindsay was going through, and I thought for the light task, I could have students sort food into the different grocery store departments, like what would be with produce, what would be in the dairy section, what would be in the frozen aisle. So maybe giving them like a list of food and having them like sort them out into where they go.
Great. Having students categorize their food vocabulary into the real physical organization of the grocery store. Great. One more idea for a light task. Mary Elizabeth. You're muted, Mary Elizabeth.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
Thank you. Just a student, what do I know? So for a light task, if it's advanced conversation, I was thinking then I would ask them to list 5 things that they bought most recently at the grocery store. And if something pops up that seems really interesting, then we could talk about, is that part of your ethnic cuisine? Is that something unusual? Is that something common? And maybe get a conversation crosswise from the students.
Great. Yeah, people love talking about food. I love talking about food. So having students list the things that they bought most recently and using that as a springboard into conversation. Great. And then next we have a fat task. Let's go to Diane. Diane Boyer, what might be a fat task?
Again, depending on what you've done, you could even get students to plan a trip So they've categorized the groceries and they've got their list, and they're going to say, okay, I'm going to go to the dairy section first and buy these 2 things, and then I'm going to go to the whatever section, and maybe get them discussing where you would go to those places and why, and getting them to support each other if they're beginners. So if they're having trouble coming up with it, and discussing, does it make, especially when it's hot, does it make sense to go to the frozen aisle first? That kind of thing.
Great. So having students talk about where they would actually go within I almost said dishwasher, the grocery store. Great, thanks. One more fat task. Let's go with Ann Biter.
Well, I thought about having students plan a special meal. They could choose if it was going to be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and then tell about what they would buy in order to have that meal, and perhaps have a dialogue between 2 students.
Great. So have them imagine they're cooking a special meal and what they would buy, and making that into a conversation or a dialogue. Great. And then finally, for the review, Nancy Kuo.
Hi, I think I would, I usually like to close the classes with, all right, let's apply this. Let's pretend that after class, when we leave, you're going to the grocery store. What do you need, or what are you planning on? I always try to give a big plug for, instead of I will for future, you know I need to buy milk. I would like to get some vegetables. I need sugar for the recipe I'm making tonight. So it can be just going around the room. If you had to go to the grocery store this afternoon, what would you be getting? Where would you be going? Do you know the checkout person there? Do you ever chat and say hi? I mean, a lot of ways to go with that.
Cool. So kind of a less structured summary where students you're kind of pushing them to use a variety of verbs and integrate things from the lesson plan. Cool. Great. Did any of you think of ideas that you would normally use in person and then think, wait, how would I do that on Zoom? Anybody think that? Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that. But I think that we can all learn from each other, sharing ideas in terms of, I was thinking about doing a dialogue line. How can I do that on Zoom? We're going to figure it out. That's the answer. Great. So again, let's switch hats and think about how I set up the activity. Did you notice that I gave you the prompt, and then I told you that I was going to be calling on you randomly, and then gave you time to think? I did that because I didn't want anyone to be feel on the spot and feel like, ugh. And because I know that giving time to think increases the quality of responses. Your responses were all great. Those were all awesome. But if I had called on you on the spot, it would have been much harder to come up with those responses. So that's going to be really important on Zoom, because we know that we're going to need to call explicitly on students on Zoom, because we experience this in our Literacy Connects staff meeting all the time. If you say, who would like to share, either nobody unmutes themselves to start talking, or everybody does it once, and then it's all garbled. So calling on students explicitly will be an important skill for facilitating on Zoom. Great. So remember our mantras as we move into lesson planning. It's gonna feel, I know I have been feeling pressure this week of, I need to figure out how to do this and I need to make this good. But the reality is that good enough is good enough. And we're gonna keep it simple because we want to have fun and we want our students to have fun. So let these mantras be your guide as we move into lesson planning. We're going to look at a sample lesson plan that is from a teacher who works for the Minnesota Literacy Council. I stole these slides from a webinar that I saw her do. In the webinar, she was explaining her approach to lesson planning and teaching on Zoom to other teachers. So this PowerPoint that we're going to see is not her teaching PowerPoint, it's the one she made for us teachers. And while we're looking at it, I would like for you to focus on 3 questions. How does she present information? How does she maximize student talk time? And what do you see in her routine that you might like to try? Okay, so I'm going to talk you through this based on what she said in the actual webinar. And I do have the link for the webinar, so I'll include that in the follow-up email. So her name is Jessica Jones, and she wrote the beginning curriculum for the Minnesota Literacy Council. She does everything on PowerPoint, and she does the same routine in every class. So her lesson planning consists of making small tweaks to her PowerPoint each time. So her lesson planning is quite streamlined. Excuse me. So she has a warm-up activity that is already projected on her PowerPoint at the beginning of class, or 10 minutes before class, so that when students arrive, they can start working while she supports other students who might be having connection issues or Zoom issues. So she gets students working right away. Once everybody is settled, she moves into doing a tech tip. Sometimes it's how to mute yourself. Sometimes it's how to rename yourself. But she does a tech tip every time, and sometimes she recycles them. Then she goes into very light grammar or vocabulary presentation and work related to the day's topic. Then she moves into question dictation, which I think is brilliant. So they're going to move into small group discussion. But what we've learned is that in Zoom, screen share doesn't follow participants into the breakouts. So if I put my conversation questions on the screen, you'll lose that when students go to the breakouts. So she has them do the questions as a dictation. She reads the conversation question and they write it down. And they do 4 conversation questions. Then they check their writing together. They either hold up their paper to the camera, or they type it in the chat, or they use the annotate function on the whiteboard. So they're checking the dictation together. So it's a listening activity and it's a writing activity. And it's making it convenient for them then to go into the breakout rooms because they've got their paper copies of the discussion questions. So hers is an intermediate class, so they can spend a good amount of time in discussion groups. And each student in the discussion group has a role. And I'm sure you've been in small groups like this where one person is the secretary, one person is the question asker, one person is the summarizer. So every student has a role. They're familiar with this routine, and they rotate through the roles throughout with each discussion question. Then finally, when they come back together, each student summarizes something they heard using sentence frames, and she changes the sentence frames each time. So again, she uses this routine every single time. She's comfortable with it, and the students are comfortable with it. So let's go back to those questions and think about how does she present the information? Put your answer in the chat box, please. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she uses PowerPoint as her main tool. First, so she gets them working right away by having that warm-up activity on the PowerPoint as students come in. So she gets them engaged in productive work right away. She uses dictation to present information and question frames and sentence frames. She's got consistently pre-planned reinforcing talk. Kathy, what was the, what's this TLK? Are you muted, Kathy? There she is.
Huh, I forgot the A.
Oh, talk. Okay. Okay, great. So she's got pre-planned, consistent, reinforcing talk that she's using to get best results from the students. I think that's a really good point, because another benefit of using this routine every time is that students are going to feel super comfortable. They're going to be able to devote their mental resources to the English rather than feeling nervous about what's going to happen next in the class. We've got dictation, holding up writing, a standard format for each class, PowerPoint simplicity. Yes, great. How does she maximize student talk time? Throw that in the chat box, please. Yeah, she's got small group discussions. She's got breakout rooms. There's the warm-up activity. The students take responsibility for the discussion. Assigning roles, so people are focused on a single task and may be more confident to answer and participate. Assigned roles. Students are working with each other via the dictated questions. And the sentence frames are there to support the lower proficiency students. Yep, great. So it's really incredible that even in this online format, we're still able to create student talk time. It just looks different. The reality is that it will look very different in a beginning class, because beginning students may not be comfortable with being sucked into breakout rooms or these other functions. So going back to that, our mantra of keep it simple, we're gonna have to learn what works for our students at their level, and figure out ways to maximize student talk time with that. Final question, what do you see in her routine that you might like to try? Throw that in the chat box. Great. I see lots of people excited about having a routine, having the warm-up activity to get students engaged right away, the question dictation, great idea. Independent work while she's helping those who are having issues. Having a routine that students will expect and feel comfortable with. The tech tip. Laura says, all of it, but I still wonder about introducing Zoom turns, chat, breakout room, mute, etc. What are best practices for that? That's a great question, Laura. For myself, I'm gonna go for it and just try things after 2 weeks. I'm gonna take 2 weeks just to get everybody settled, and then I'm just gonna try stuff and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, then I won't do it again. That's how I'm planning to proceed. So there's a lot of uncertainty around lesson planning, but luckily you have me. So lucky. I have been spending the last week creating a whole bunch of resources for you. And about halfway through the week, I realized, oh wait, I'm teaching too. So these are actually resources for myself. That was a good realization. So let me show you what I have prepared for you. Okay, are you seeing the teacher resource page? Yeah. Okay, let's review how to get to the teacher resource page. We go programs for adults, Ella. Green bar, come down to resources. And normally there's a password, but I'm already signed in. Pop quiz, what's the password? Carrie wins. That was a loyalty test. Carrie's the only loyal one. Yes, the password is LC1. LC1. Literacy, Sheila was doing TPR earlier. She's going LC1. So LC1, and here I have created a whole new section called Summer English Zoom. Click on the plus sign and you get lesson plans. So I've created day 1 lesson plans for intermediate and beginner levels. Special thanks to Diane Boyer for helping out with this, with her experience from teaching during the pilot. So in the lesson plan, I've indicated the activity, what physical materials you'll need, and what Zoom skills you'll need for each activity. Use at your own risk. Like I said, I have never done this before, so no guarantees. And then these lesson plans are all templates. So the idea is that they're good for all levels, and you can plug in whatever content you intend to use. So let's say we're still working on our at the grocery store lesson plan, and we want to have a dialogue between a clerk and a customer. I can plug that into this template and just follow the steps in this template. So we've got a grammar lesson plan, reading activity lesson plan, and for intermediate and advanced, reading the news on News for You or Times in Plain English or whatever. So lots of lesson plans. We've got, we'll be talking more about homework in a second, but these are my top picks that I've used throughout my career for online homework sources. It can be overwhelming to try and Google around and find high quality stuff. So this is the stuff that I know to be high quality. So up here we have homework picks for all levels, and down here are more advanced ones for intermediate and advanced. So you can, explore those. And then we have multilingual Zoom support. We know that some students have experience with Zoom, but some might struggle. So I've compiled Zoom support in various languages here. So some of them are about computers, some are about Androids or iPhones or tablets. So you can find your student's language here and copy and paste this into a message to them. There you go. That's what I've been doing this week. So we are more than halfway through. We're going way over. So let's take a stretch break. We've been sitting too long. So stop your video. Everybody stand up. And let's do some twists and some monkey arms. See my arms. And kick your legs. And shake it out. And have a seat. Okay, so our last component is how do I assign paperless homework? We know that paper homework is not really going to be an option because the majority of people don't have printers in their homes, and going to the post office to mail packets is just going to be really difficult to do. So we're going to focus on paperless homework. So let's think about, well, we talked earlier about what homework is for. We know that homework is for extending learning outside of class time, for challenging students, and keeping students engaged and motivated. In the chat box, please tell me what makes for effective homework. What are the qualities of an effective homework assignment? Awesome. Great. So it reinforces the learning objective, what I want students to be able to do with English by the end of class. It asks students to use the English they learned in class. It's relevant to students' daily life and communication needs. It's clearly defined. It's interesting. It helps remind them of English words. It might be easy or it might be challenging. It's an activity that allows practicing lessons taught in a Zoom session, reinforcement. It addresses the learner's needs and is timely and reinforces previous learning. There's just the right amount of challenge. It helps them apply what they have learned, but reach slightly beyond. And it's flexible to accommodate different ability levels. It's practical use in authentic language rather than busy work. So it's very clearly linked to what we've done in class, what we're going to do in class, and to real life. It's easy to access on a mobile device, like an audio file to listen to, or easy access digital document. And it's related to the topic and helping students feel comfortable. Absolutely. Right on. We want a clear and specific assignment. We want a clear and specific explanation of how the task relates to the classwork, and clear and specific modeling of how to access and complete the task, especially in this online format. So let's look at some examples. Throw an idea in the chat box. What could we have students take a picture of and text us a photo of? And let's say related to the class theme. What kind of homework could they take a picture of and send you? Yeah, absolutely. What they ate for dinner, what they bought at the grocery store, a place where they found some new vocabulary, photo of an item from a grocery store and how they used it, etc. Yes. So with taking just a photo of food or something, maybe they would need to text you the names of the food. So they're doing some English work there. A picture of a dish they made, and then a text explaining the ingredients. Yep, so it's not just a photo, it's a photo with some English involved. So they could write a list of, no, great. Mary Elizabeth says, for getting to know you class, take a picture of something they can't live without, and it has to be a thing. So they take a picture and then they explain it to the class. Nice. So students can write a list of vocabulary words, find realia of vocabulary words, write 5 sentences, write 5 questions, write a letter, any kind of written assignment they can do. Here's an example from Madeline's class in the pilot. She had her students write a letter and take a picture and send it to her. So this is a student's submission. They send it as in her class, they send it as a text, but Kathy Zodar, who did the intermediate pilot, she had them email because her students used email. Here's another idea. Students can record and send a video of themselves doing what? Throw your ideas in the chat. Super fun. Yes. Yes. Yep. Cool. So they can send a video of them speaking English with somebody, explaining their favorite activity, introducing someone they live with, preparing and describing a food, talking about their favorite food, anything at all that has to do with whatever the current theme is. Yes, Joey. Teaching their kids to cook in English, describing things they like to eat, reading a recipe, showing what is in the cupboard or the fridge, themselves telling a story from the week where they had to speak English with somebody they didn't know, showing and telling about any picture they like, walking around their neighborhood. Exactly. Yep. There's kind of endless flexibility here. And students are super comfortable with recording and taking pictures. They do the WhatsApp and the Snapchat and the TikTok and all of those apps. They're good at these skills. Homework can also be pre-work for the next class. So in Kathy Zodar's intermediate class at Sacred Heart, well, online, she spent class, they were practicing future tense conversation and then pulling some grammar work out of that, looking at the future tense. Their homework was to prepare a mini presentation about their plans for the weekend in the future tense, and they had to include a photo to share. So then the next class was spent with the students doing their presentations. So bonus, it gets the students working outside of class and it saves you lesson planning time. And then there's also a ton of online practice that students can do. This is a screenshot. This is one of Madeline's assignments to her class. She texts with her class in WhatsApp. So here, she's explaining the assignment. She wants them to read this link and then do the exercises in these 2 links. So it's a very clear assignment, and they know exactly where they need to go and what they need to do. So like I showed on the website, there are many, many, many options. There are a lot of fantastic options. There are some mediocre options. Hopefully I've steered you toward, you agree with me that these are some good ones. This week, your homework will be to explore some of these things and look for things that you might use. But it's important to remember that we lesson plan first. We think about what we want students to be able to do first. And the homework is just a support to that. It's not, ooh, I found this cool thing on Rachel's English. I'm going to design my whole lesson around this. Rather, that stuff is a support to what you're already doing in class so that we're maximizing that face-to-face not really face-to-face. Video to video together time. So here's an example homework assignment that I might assign in my class. If we were working on, let's say we were reading an article and we were working on word stress, syllable stress, and stress within sentences. I would ask them to watch this video. I would show them how to access it. They would practice with the video and then record and send me a video of themselves reading 2 sentences, focusing on word stress. So I've made it very concrete. It's very connected with what we're doing in class, and it's a skill that they'll use outside of class as well. Okay. So, last thing is troubleshooting, because there's likely to be trouble. So when that happens, the first step is to take a deep breath, because this is not high stakes at all. This is fun. So if you find yourself feeling stressed out and frustrated with the technology, take a deep breath. Make sure that you have a plan B for student contact. That might be, you've already established texting with them, or WhatsApp or email, but some way to be in touch with students outside of Zoom. It'll be important for students to feel comfortable texting you as well, so that they feel okay saying, "Teacher, I can't get on to Zoom. Can you help me?" So making sure that you have some way outside of Zoom to be in touch with them. You can ask other students for help. Some students may have more experience with Zoom than we do, so they can help us. Or if they share a first language with a student who is struggling, they can help in the first language. And then a tip that we've learned is that if students have a shaky connection, advise them to stop their video, because that usually frees up enough bandwidth that they can still connect and see our video. It just turns off their streaming video. So day 1 is coming up. What might happen on day 1? What are some things that you are anticipating? Throw those in the chat box, please. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, so people might have trouble accessing the Zoom link. There might be unmitigated chaos. Yep, students might not be able to attend. Students, especially if you had a tight-knit group before, students really might want to just catch up. They haven't seen each other in 2 months or however long it's been. That somebody won't be able to get on or might not be able to see your screen share. Panic is a possibility. People have trouble connecting, freezing a video, trouble directing people to icons, lots of background noise and family members in the background. If students can't get on, trouble with mic and video, interesting background activity that might need video turned off. Somebody might interrupt, knock on your door. Students might want to talk about COVID. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Your dog might bark and barf, or your power might go off. Great. We've covered all the bases here. So yeah, these are the things, you nailed them all and then some. These things might happen on day 1. They might, but it is okay. Do you remember this poster from the 80s? Hang in there, kitty. Yeah, I remember this being on my wall in my elementary school library. Yep, so hang in there. It's okay. It'll get worked out. It's not high stakes. So, what are our goals for the summer? Because in the midst of all of this stressful stuff, it'll be good to remember our goals. In the chat box, please tell me our goals for the summer. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Keep it simple, have fun, think summer camp. Throw some English in there if you have time. Great. And our mantras, I see that folks have already put those in the chat box. Keep it simple, and good enough is good enough. There is no gold standard for summer English Zoom classes. Not yet. Carrie says om. So I will send you this week's checklist, which includes, I know there have been a lot of links flying at you, buried in your inboxes and such. So I've compiled them all into this week's checklist. It links to our day one lesson plans, the teacher resources page, the previous checklists, if you would like to review those skills, and the previous session videos for review. So let's see how we did. I'm going to expand so I can see all of you. These were our objectives for the session. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs sideways or a thumbs down. Do you feel like you can describe some options for presenting information on Zoom? Great. How about some ways of creating student talk time? Cool. Paperless options for giving homework? Cool. Ideas for troubleshooting? Do you at least feel less stressed out about troubleshooting? Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you again for taking the plunge with us. We are all going to be learning together, and I'm really looking forward to it. Being with the students again and feeling those good vibes. So have a great week. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions this week and especially next. I assume I'll probably be in touch again before next week. But good luck exploring all those resources and have a great week. Stay cool. Bye, everybody. Definitely, Carrie. Carrie says seeing the students again will make it all worthwhile. It will.